One from obscurity to the rebellious icon of American Pickers, Danielle Colby did not emerge from the world of television, nor was she accustomed to the mainstream glare of studio lights. She was born and raised in Davenport, Iowa, a Midwestern city no one expected to produce a reality TV icon with punk and burlesque flair. From an early age, Danielle displayed a rebellious, nonconformist spirit. Rather than follow an academic path, she threw herself into street performance, lived within independent arts communities, and soon became a celebrated burlesque dancer throughout the Midwest. Her body adorned with tattoos, her gaze cool, and her presence part vintage, part defiant, she commanded attention wherever she appeared, be it on a dance floor or at a flea market stall. Colby has remarked that for her, burlesque was more than mere performance. It was a form of self-liberation. She founded the troupe Burlesque La Moustache and appeared in shows across cities from Chicago to New Orleans. Those who knew her then agree, Danielle possessed an uncanny magnetism, half allure, half challenge. Yet her life took a different turn in 2004 when she reconnected with an old acquaintance, Mike Wolfe. At that time, Wolfe was managing antique archaeology, and he invited Danielle to join as his office manager. Initially, her duties were straightforward, organizing paperwork, managing schedules, and providing logistical support. But everything changed in 2010 with the launch of American Pickers. At first, producers focused solely on the duo of Wolfe and Frank Fritz, two men traveling across America in search of hidden treasures. Danielle appeared only briefly each episode, introducing locations, making phone calls, and serving as background. Yet it was her authenticity, sharp insight, and distinctiveness that captivated viewers. In a world dominated by collecting uncles, Danielle shone like a brilliant fragment, unblended, unafraid of judgment, and resolutely herself. Gradually, her screen time increased. Audiences no longer saw the secretary from Iowa, but rather a decisive woman who analyzed items, negotiated prices, and ensured the smooth operation of American Pickers. Many observers described Colby as the program's hidden soul. If Mike provided the rhythm and Frank embodied rustic charm, Danielle served as the connective tissue, infusing artistry, a hint of wildness, and vibrant energy. She did more than draw television audiences. She expanded her personal influence. Her social media platforms amassed hundreds of thousands of followers. She launched her own fashion line, designing retro and punk rock-inspired clothing, hosted community-oriented performances, and became a feminist icon within the traditionally male-dominated antique world. However, that very fame placed Danielle in a precarious position. The more prominent she became, the more she found herself wedged between Mike and Frank, two pillars of the show with opposing visions and temperaments. The more frequently she appeared on screen, the more indispensable she became, and the more scrutinized every action was. As her personal brand grew, Colby became increasingly dependent on the public's expectation of her image. Authentic, strong, unique, yet under control. One fact is indisputable. Danielle possessed a keen understanding of reality TV mechanics. She knew when to speak, when to remain silent, when to smile, and when to withhold to generate stage effect. She was calculating and astute. But precisely for that reason, in the eyes of those focusing only on outcomes, Danielle could readily become the ideal suspect when scandal emerged, especially so when Frank Fritz, once a close friend, met an untimely death, leaving behind journal entries that cast her in an unfavorable light. Danielle began as an invisible figure behind the scenes of reality television, yet through personality and intellect, she transformed herself into its focal point, a woman who rose from the wings to center stage, from a supporting role to an icon. But as television history has shown, the price of prominence can be a fall as unforeseen as it is swift. Backstage tensions of American Pickers. The success of American Pickers stemmed not only from its rare antiques, but also from the interplay among its three principal figures: Mike Wolfe, astute and controlling; Frank Fritz, down-to-earth and amiable; and Danielle Colby, bold and sharp-witted. Yet behind the studio lights, nothing was as harmonious as the polished image portrayed. The tension between Mike and Frank was no secret in production circles. They disagreed over the show's direction, profit-sharing, and, more contentiously, Danielle's role. A former editor at History Channel during 2016 to 2019 revealed that in numerous internal meetings, Mike expressed dissatisfaction with Danielle's on-screen prominence. He felt the show was off-tone because of her punk attitude, the editor recounted. What no one foresaw, however, was that it was the closeness between Mike and Danielle that ultimately drove the wedge. Frank, who had partnered with Mike since the company's inception, began to feel marginalized. No longer the kindred spirits they once were, Mike and Frank frequently clashed over filming locations, item valuations, and business strategies. Danielle, who initially sought to remain neutral, was gradually drawn into the maelstrom of conflict. Crew members describe arguments that evolved beyond antique appraisal into an unspoken power struggle among the three. At the end of 2019, Frank departed the show, officially citing health reasons. Yet industry insiders understood that the split was anything but amicable. In an interview with Antique Monthly, Frank wrote, "I no longer feel trusted. Things are happening behind my back." Soon thereafter, leaked internal emails began to surface. Frank suspected that Danielle had sided entirely with Mike, abandoning her neutral stance. Numerous messages showed Danielle reporting directly to Mike on scheduling, partners, and off-show activities, decisions that the trio had previously made jointly. Suspicions spread further when private messages between Danielle and Mike were exposed. In one exchange, Danielle wrote, "Frank is losing control. If he returns to the show, everything will fall apart." This message appeared weeks before Frank's official withdrawal. Although Danielle claimed it was a momentary outburst, its repercussions proved far more consequential. The situation escalated when Frank's personal journal emerged after his passing. He wrote, "I no longer trust Danielle. She always smiles, but I feel watched. I know they are scheming to remove me." According to behavioral analysts, these entries reveal severe psychological strain and a pervasive sense of betrayal. A former production assistant recalled that Frank once abruptly walked off set after seeing Danielle and Mike talking privately in a vehicle. "He just said, 'I know they're hiding something,' and left," the assistant said. Danielle, for her part, maintained her silence throughout, issuing only one statement: "I have always considered Frank family. If he felt hurt, I regret that, but I cannot control everything." Yet control became the very accusation leveled against Danielle. From a behind-the-scenes coordinator, she had gradually assumed authority over scheduling, partner outreach, and even selecting shoot locations, a soft power upon which even Mike Wolfe relied. When Frank was pushed out, Danielle's role expanded further, raising eyebrows among production staff. A leaked 2023 internal document revealed that Danielle had access to the entire partner database, auction information, and inventory lists of antique archaeology. She was the only person besides Mike authorized to sign commercial contracts. All of this, coupled with her close personal relationship with Mike, fueled rampant conspiracy theories. Matters came to a head when the FBI announced an investigation into Frank Fritz's death. What had begun as concerns over internal discord swiftly escalated into a criminal inquiry. U.S. media outlets began to re-examine every detail: Danielle's unexplained absences from shoots, her private business trips with Mike to Puerto Rico where she purchased property valued at over $400,000 immediately after receiving a transfer from Mike's shell company via the show's intermediary. Danielle Colby was cast into the epicenter of suspicion. Television reports no longer referred to her as an inspiration, but as the most dangerous woman in American reality TV. Public opinion polarized. Some viewed her as a scapegoat. Others believed she held the darkest secrets of the series. A question soon arose: was Danielle's prominence the result of individual talent or the outcome of a strategic consolidation of power and elimination of rivals? And if the latter, was it a calculated move or an inadvertent descent within an unforgiving environment? Although the answer remains unclear, the winds of doubt had already unleashed a storm. Danielle Colby, once celebrated as the creative soul of American Pickers, stood at a crossroads of fate. And with Frank Fritz's name now tied to a federal investigation into his untimely death, the final fragments of this dark tableau began to surface. Frank Fritz and the unusual death. On September 30, 2024, news of Frank Fritz's passing at age 60 spread across social media and morning news shows. Best known as co-founder and on-screen face of American Pickers, Fritz's death was initially attributed by Iowa health authorities to late sequelae of cerebral infarction, complications from a stroke he'd suffered 2 years earlier. Yet just weeks after a quiet family funeral, a series of disturbing details emerged, shocking America. Frank may not have died of natural causes. It all began when FBI agents arrived unannounced at the hospital where Fritz had been treated. Internal federal sources say they'd received anonymous tips suggesting irregular interventions in Frank's care during his final months. Allegations included altered treatment protocols, incorrect medication dosages, and phone calls logged between close associates, among them Danielle Colby, that didn't match the hospital's records. Investigators then discovered a copy of Frank's personal journal in a small Davenport warehouse. In anguished scroll, he wrote, I know they want me gone. Every time I wake up, someone's messing with my meds. Danielle says she's just checking the dosage, but I don't trust her anymore. Those tense entries became key evidence, opening a new line of inquiry. Had someone exploited Frank's deteriorating health to engineer his death? The case took another turn with grainy security camera footage from Frank's neighborhood on the night he was found unconscious. A black SUV, later traced to Mike Wolfe, pulled up outside his house. Though the image was blurred, FBI facial recognition software returned a 74% match to Danielle Colby sitting in the passenger seat. Cell tower logs placed her phone in the vicinity between 8:30 and 10:15 p.m., the exact window when Frank lost contact with his neighbor. But perhaps most damning were text messages retrieved from a telecommunications backup server under a federal warrant. In them, Danielle texts Mike, "He's alone now. Nobody's scheduled to check on him until tomorrow. Windows closing." And Mike replies, "It's handled. Delete this thread." That exchange, timestamped at 9:47 p.m., came less than an hour before a neighbor discovered Frank unconscious in his home. As the evidence mounted, investigators focused on possible financial motives. In the 12 months preceding his death, Frank had sued an Iowa branch of Antique Archaeology, Mike Wolfe's company, for cutting into his share of the show's licensing revenue. That lawsuit was still pending when Frank died. Even more suspiciously, 2 days after his death, $175,000 was wired from Vintage Solutions LLC, an offshore entity tied to Mike, into Danielle's bank account. The FBI promptly summoned Danielle Colby as a material witness in their homicide inquiry. Tabloid headlines soon cried, "Danielle Colby, from muse to murder accomplice." And Frank Fritz's death was no accident. She knows why. Even many of her former supporters began asking, why has she stayed silent? Why no public statement? Why was she there at every crossroads of evidence and motive? At a brief press conference, Danielle's attorney, Margaret Wilson, insisted, "My client is innocent." These allegations rest on fragmentary, out of context. Danielle Colby's days grew darker as she trudged through the wreckage of her past, memories of laughter in the van, shared stories on the road, and moments where it felt like they were truly a family. Now, those memories were weaponized, twisted by courtrooms and headlines into things she barely recognized. Mike Wolfe's silence, once a balm in their long hours of filming, now struck her as cold. Frank's absence echoed through her soul like a scream in an empty hall. The investigation had unearthed things no one expected: bank records, burner phones, off-grid storage units with stacks of vintage firearms and cash. Authorities were scrambling to discern if this was just the eccentric stash of a man known for collecting, or something more sinister. Frank's autopsy was inconclusive at first: undetermined trauma, possible overdose, signs of prior injury. But as forensic analysts dug deeper, they found microscopic evidence of forced ingestion, a bitter-tasting residue in his throat not typically found in prescription painkillers. Danielle stared at the medical examiner's report with cold hands, rereading the highlighted passages. If someone had drugged Frank against his will, then this wasn't an accident. This was homicide. Her breath caught in her chest as she realized what that truly meant. Someone close to Frank had done this. Someone he trusted. Someone who had access. The Iowa State Police questioned Danielle twice more. Each time, she refused a lawyer, wanting to appear cooperative and transparent. But each time, they asked more precise questions, about Frank's last known arguments with Mike Wolfe, about production halts that weren't publicly documented, and about a strange voice message Frank left on Danielle's phone 2 days before his death. "He said he was being followed," she whispered to the detectives. "He said if something happened to him, it wasn't an accident." The room fell silent. Danielle watched the detective's pen stop mid-word. "Why didn't you report that before?" they asked, their tone sharper now. "Because I thought it was just Frank being paranoid. He had moments, mood swings, you know? I didn't think he meant it." But now Danielle couldn't shake the feeling that she'd missed something. She returned to her office, stacked with old photos, production logs, and memorabilia from the show's heyday. Hidden among these relics was a USB drive Frank had given her years ago, in one of his more lucid moments. "Just in case," he had said with a grin, half serious, half dramatic. She never looked at it, until now. Her fingers trembled as she inserted the drive into her laptop. A folder popped up titled simply, "Truth." Inside were dozens of audio recordings, Frank ranting about Mike, about History Channel XX pressuring him to sign NDA agreements he didn't understand, about secret deals Mike allegedly made with antique brokers to fake pics for better ratings. One recording chilled her to the bone. Frank's voice, slurred but coherent, "They think I don't know. But I know what Mike did. He's not who you think he is. If something happens to me, if I disappear, don't let him paint me as the drunk. Don't let him win." Danielle sobbed quietly, alone in that dark room. She now had what might be evidence, dangerous evidence. But what would she do with it? Release it? Send it to the authorities? If she went public, she knew the wrath of the network and its lawyers would come down hard. And what if she was wrong? What if Frank's paranoia, his inner demons, had warped the truth? Meanwhile, Mike Wolfe remained defiant in the face of mounting pressure. His team issued statements. His lawyers deflected. Publicly, he mourned Frank and expressed confusion over the direction of the investigation. But behind closed doors, insiders whispered about settlements being negotiated with the network, about Mike distancing himself from the production entirely. Rumors swirled that he was planning to flee to Costa Rica, where he had quietly purchased a secluded property years ago. He always talked about retiring early, one former crew member said. But not like this. Not when Frank's barely cold. The final nail came when a former field producer, now retired and bitter, stepped forward with a sworn affidavit. She claimed she witnessed a violent confrontation between Mike and Frank off camera during season 16. Mike slammed Frank against the side of the van, she wrote. Frank hit his head and was dazed. It was downplayed as an accident, but I don't believe it was. Investigators reopened the timeline, re-evaluating every medical record, every incident of Frank's health decline, through a new lens. Suddenly, everything took on a darker hue. Danielle, now holding the USB drive like it was made of fire, made her choice. She contacted a journalist from a reputable investigative outlet, someone she trusted with a previous story about antique smuggling rings. They met discreetly in a bar outside of Des Moines. She handed him the drive and told him everything. "I'm not doing this for revenge," she said. "I'm doing it for Frank. He deserved better." The story exploded within 48 hours. Headlines screamed, "Inside the death of Frank Fritz, allegations against Mike Wolfe surface." Network executives scrambled. Ratings for the reruns tanked. Sponsors pulled deals. American Pickers was officially placed on indefinite hiatus. Mike Wolfe issued a carefully crafted statement denying all allegations, decrying the media circus and lamenting a friendship lost to time and tragedy. But behind the PR mask, legal action brewed. Iowa prosecutors empaneled a grand jury. Mike was subpoenaed. A gag order was imposed. Danielle was called to testify. The courthouse was swarmed with fans, journalists, and former cast and crew members hoping to see justice, or at least some truth. As Danielle took the stand, her hands trembled, but her voice remained steady. She described Frank as brilliant, flawed, haunted, and loving. She told them about the recordings. She told them about the final voicemail. She told them that, despite everything, she missed him every single day. The jury deliberated for weeks. Mike was never charged with murder, but he was indicted for obstruction, witness intimidation, and falsifying documents related to Frank's medical care while under contractual obligation. It wasn't the justice many hoped for, but it was a reckoning. Danielle left the courthouse into a blizzard of flashbulbs. She didn't stop to answer questions. She didn't need to. She had done what Frank asked. She didn't let them paint him as just the drunk. She didn't let them win. In the months that followed, Danielle retreated from public life. She returned to Iowa, opened a small vintage shop that doubled as a memorial to Frank. People came from all over to see the wall of photos, the display of his favorite boots, the turntable playing his favorite records on a loop. She hosted grief circles and storytelling nights. She transformed the tragedy into a tribute. And when the first snowfall came that winter, she stood outside the shop, looking at the sky, her breath visible in the cold. Somewhere, she believed, Frank was watching. And maybe, just maybe, he finally had peace.